kind of laughing about the fact that whenever, like, take, for instance, Star Trek, whenever they ran into these new societies, they were pretty much agrarian, right? Mm-hmm. They were never very tech advanced. So we thought maybe it was predictive programming. Maybe they were trying to tell us something. But you're right. You know, there was a couple of things he said here that really struck me. He said that education has been redefined to better suit the tool. It's not for the children, it's to better suit the tool, the mechanism of delivery. And then he also made it very clear that it doesn't matter if it's in the classroom or if it's at home doing homework or if they're in their room. It's the technology itself that's the inherent problem. And that's what's changing how our kids are learning and processing and developing and, you know, how their neural pathways are being formed and how are they absorbing information. It's this flickering screen that is changing everything. And so, you know, we've all been sold this bill of goods for I don't know how long now, where they've been saying we got to have one-to-one technology, right? Every kid has to have a computing device; they have to have it. And we fought that pretty hard at my kids' high school. And so when they were seniors, that was the first year that the tech was brought in one-to-one in their classroom. And they noticed the immediate difference. My kids hated it. They just said it was the conversation in the classroom completely. I mean, it was completely different than what it used to be. Mm-hmm. Kids had the screens flipped up. Everybody knew how to get around the firewalls. People were gaming on Facebook, on social media. It was just totally distracting. They were not engaged, and so it was not an enhancement to the learning. It was actually it was a very large distraction, and so. You know, it just proved what I had suspected all along and what we had suspected. You know, a lot of us on the board were, you know, fighting against it. But, you know, people think just because it's tech, just because it's expensive, because, you know, everybody else is doing it, it's a good idea, but it's not.
And friends, yet we see the push for more and more and more technology in the classroom, and we'll be delving into more of this in our next segment here. But we're talking today with Bonnie Gasper, the chairman of Child Protection League, and just yesterday released a column and called her up, said, can you join us here in Crosstalk, called The Shallow Brain, Why America's Middle Schoolers Are Losing the Ability to Read. And friends, sadly, that is what is taking place. And we find that we are living in a generation where we have to speak in 30-second sound bites, or sometimes even fewer than that. And we have to change that picture on the screen, that image on the screen, over and over again in rapid fashion. And the whole comprehension seems to go from being able to listen to a half-hour message or an hour program down to just a couple of minutes, because that's where the attention span is completed and is exhausted at that point. But we're going to get into some more information right after the break, why students are losing the ability to read, and friends, not just talk about the problem, but some solutions as well. So stay with us. You're listening to Crosstalk, coming your way from the VCY American Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, Creation Seminar speaker at the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how many different types of animals did Noah take on board the ark?
Chris, detractors from the biblical flood story say that there were way too many animals to have fit on board the ark. But not so. Let's look carefully. First off, we need to recognize that most animals live in the ocean and would not have to be on board the ark. They would survive, at least in representative numbers, outside the ark. By the way, Noah didn't even have to take 2 of every species. The Bible says 2 of every kind, probably a broader category which might include a number of species, like the dog kind. Altogether, I suspect that there were probably less than 20,000 animals on board the ark. This was difficult for Noah, but not impossible. At least that's the way I see it from a back to Genesis perspective.
For more on creation, visit our website at www.icr.org. I'm Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
Why students are losing the ability to read. Our topic today with Bonnie Gasper, chairman of Child Protection League. And friends, it's astounding. Just astounding to see what is happening within the realm of education. And sadly, it's oftentimes we as parents that are enabling them, that are pushing them down this pathway as well. Now, in that first segment, I aired this clip from Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath, a neuroscientist, as he testified before Congress, because I think that really sets a backdrop for us. But, Bonnie, if you would, Tell us about the average middle school student today and the amount of screen time that they are actually embarking on.
I will. And before I do that, if that's all right, I'm just going to mention very briefly, because the middle schoolers are reflecting what's actually happening in our preschool. And so as I was preparing for a presentation I'll be giving on this next week at our conference that we'll mention later,
Sure.
I was just looking at a bunch of information that was coming out of Education Week, which is not a conservative publication, right? We know this is a very radical outfit. But they had teachers self-reporting that their preschoolers are coming in unable to do fine motor skills. They don't know how to use scissors. They don't know how to use crayons. They don't know how to manipulate their fingers. And when devices are taken away, or devices are used for calming down time, but when the devices are removed, there's tantrums. And so they've just decided that it's not worth the 15 minutes of trying to find peace to have the devices out at all. But these kids are already conditioned to be on these devices. And so the whole reading aspect, that is just, it's almost like the goal used to be in kindergarten, everybody was reading by the end of kindergarten. Now they've moved that to second grade, third grade, because kids are unable to read, and they abandoned phonics, as we know, so long ago, and thankfully there's been a bit of a return to that, because I think they're realizing that the science of reading, the whole language approach just was an abysmal failure. But so you've got preschoolers and elementary school kids who are already on screen, so they're conditioned. They're conditioned. They're used to this. They're already being conditioned to be on their stuff at home. They're being on stuff at school, all the everything. So by the time they get to middle school, this one actually kind of made my jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe that the average middle schooler now spends approximately 12 hours a day on some kind of device. That would include what they're doing in school as well as what they're doing at home, on homework, or in their own room. So if they're only awake 16 hours a day, that's only 4 hours where they're not watching a flickering screen and just they're just watching. They're passive observers of what's going on in the background. And so this, again, has created a whole host of problems that it was the University of North Carolina, actually. They did a very in-depth study on this group of kids. And they came up with their own data, shocked them, actually. What they found was something they called, they kind of had on the full umbrella called self-control failure. So what they called it was that middle schoolers were spending about a third of their school day, which is about 20 minutes of every hour, on their phone, even during active instruction. They found that the average kid checked their device 64 times during the school hours. They were just doing these frequent pickups, these check-ins, and they were just looking at social media content primarily, or just what are their friends doing on TikTok, that kind of stuff. So it wasn't anything for any kind of enhanced learning. It was just entertainment. And so it just created all kinds of obvious issues where, there was attention deficit, there's comprehension gaps. They called it, the doctor had mentioned something called the skimming. That does happen. It's called the skip it habit. So basically for kids, when they're reading something on a device, they're kind of trying to fly through it. If they don't understand it or it just is a little bit more challenging, they just skip over it. They just go past it. They just blow past it. And because it's something they think, well, I can get back to it later, or I can look it up later. And, there was a very common thread feeding through all of this, too, where the researchers found that kids were starting to view knowledge as just something to be found, not actually to be learned. And that really struck me, because I thought that is a whole different approach to how education, we shouldn't be looking at education as something just to be, located on a device and cataloged for later. We're talking about people being able to process things and abstract thought and cognitive thinking and coming up with ideas and inventions and ethical and moral things and all of the different things that we need to be talking about. But it's become a very passive environment for kids because they don't have the attention span. They don't want to read in depth, and they just want to skip past it and just get to something that's funny and gives them the dopamine hit that is entertaining. And that's just, go ahead.
You talked about, this comprehension gap and even the reception gap. You give instructions or you give, some information to someone, and it's like a deer looking in headlights. It's that look of bewilderment.
Yes, it is, right, because a lot of times Well, and I guess we have to think about it too. I mean, how many things have our kids already missed? I mean, I don't think my kids ever even had to write a check because that technology was already, obsolete, or address a thank you note.
Right.
Nobody was mailing anything anymore. So when you give simple instructions like this or talk about stuff like that, a lot of times it is just a deer in the headlight looks. But the bottom line is they don't even understand the terminology at times. And that's something that a lot of educators are talking about too, is this whole vocabulary deficit, which is leading to contributing to the comprehension gap. They can't use tier 2 words. They don't understand them. They don't know what they mean. And because their feeds are full of just the culture and the current lingo, a lot of that's just getting substituted for common day language. And a lot of literature that's being written today, too, because they're not picking up the great classics and the great books of the past and reading those things, they're not getting this enhanced, deep, full, and rich, illustrative vocabulary that we all grew up with.
Yeah,
it's just becoming very, very narrow.
And it's as if their mind is slowing down.
Yes, their minds are slowing down.
Wow.
Yeah, that is, it almost sounds like hyperbole, and it sounds like it should be the opposite effect, because people say, well, there's so much information now, there's so much to read, there's so much coming at you. It should be, you'd think it'd be the opposite effect, but what's actually happening is that it's actually their minds are slowing down. And some people call it the smooth brain, which I think is a very interesting analogy to give people kind of a visual of what kind of damage it's doing to people's brains or to children's brains. But because they are not, they're not processing, they're not thinking, they're not daydreaming, they're not wondering, they're not, going into introspection or just thinking abstract thoughts, it is becoming very shallow, very slow, and it's just rinse and repeat. They just look at something, you get a laugh out of it, you move on to the next thing. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, even those bursts are becoming even quicker and quicker. I mean, from 30 seconds to 15 seconds. We've even noticed it even in our own work as a board. I mean, we tend to publish long-form analysis and research and things like that. But it gets to the point where people are saying, we can't spend 5 minutes on it. That's just too long.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And it's just, so I think part of it, not only is it happening to kids, it's actually happening to a lot of demographics. I think we're all getting sucked into this culture to a certain degree. Really,
that growing attention deficit to all of this.
Yes, yes, a growing attention deficit for all of us. And I think I even find it sometimes, if you're multitasking on different things, you're flipping between screens too, like a lot of us are doing. And sometimes I think we're actually even training our brains to a certain degree to have some attention deficit. So I think it takes a lot of self-discipline to just carve out this time and say, all right, we're going to stay off the screens and we're going to focus on the task at hand and stick with it until it's done. And that is something that is really, really hard to find right now in nurturing children, because they just don't have the wherewithal to do it. They just don't want to. They just don't want to read. They just don't want to sit down. They just don't want to stay at it until it's finished, because it's just too hard. It's just too hard.
Bonnie, there are those who will claim that digital screen reading is just as good as print. How do you respond to that?
It's very inferior. Everything that I have seen on it is that what it does, well, first of all, they've actually, it was the University of Norway, I believe, it was some study or some group in Norway, but they actually did scans of the brain as kids were reading a book versus reading something on screen. And the brain literally lit up. Just lit up all over the screen if they were reading from a page. It just lit up all the language centers, like the prefrontal cortex, where memory is stored. There's just tactile things. There's all different kinds of things going on when you're actually handling a page and looking at a word on a page, and there aren't graphics and lights and things that are interrupting it. So it's definitely different. The brain is not as actively engaged in screen reading or screen reading. And they say there's also a big deficit in the abstract versus the concrete. And part of it is that when students are trying to get a basic fact from a screen, they just can't. They're not looking at the overarching themes again. This is that kind of cognitive processing that we're talking about, drawing these complex inferences. They're just looking at what they're seeing, and it's a totally different visual stimulation. And part of it, too, is that they just skip it, or they just think digital offloading is another word that I've heard. That kids think, well, if I don't have to remember it, if I don't need to remember it, I'll just look it up tomorrow because it's just always accessible.
Right,
so there's this mental almost check it off, check out. I don't need to retain this, and they just kind of dump it so it doesn't go into the filing cabinet of the brain. And they, and I think there's also, as they said, that kids often believe that they're doing better because they can read digital text faster. But objective tests have shown that their comprehension is a lot lower when they're reading slower, or it's lower than when they're reading in print because print is just different. It's just totally different. But I think one of the biggest red flags is what teachers are reporting. And thankfully, there are some teachers out there still really being honest about this stuff, but they said that kids just don't have reading stamina. Mm-hmm. And that's something the professor said. That's something that preschool teachers have said. That's what middle school and elementary school teachers have said. They just don't have reading stamina. And they picked a year, which I thought was interesting. They said it was significant since 2019. And there's something else that might be in play here, and I didn't write about this, but that might be, a topic for another show. But in 2019 was when there was a huge shift away from academics in school to social-emotional learning, which is just all psychosocial, assessments and data mining and things like that. So it was just a movement away from true academic instruction to behavioral things and, all the stuff that was just masquerading as an education. But I think those are going hand in hand. It's very interesting. I think it's just made this reading on the screens just accelerate. Just the damage that's being done accelerate because not only is the content poorer, the method of delivery is poorer as well.
Friends, you're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Bonnie Gasper is with us today, and we're just addressing this issue, why students are losing the ability to read. Let's just introduce this topic, and we'll cover it on the other side of the break, and also solutions on the other side of the break. But what is the state of writing today? Is there a correlation between the two?
Yes, there is definitely a correlation between. Well, for a while they abandoned. Do you remember that really, thankfully short-lived in time where they said we're not going to teach cursive writing anymore? Yeah. But one of the first things that alarmed me was, well, then how are they going to read any of our original founding documents? Mm-hmm. How are they going to read things, right? If you don't know how to read the original source documents, then you are actually enslaved to whatever is coming out digitally, and that stuff is getting altered, as we know. And we'll talk about that in some of the solutions. But yeah, so kids need to do that. Plus, that does, again, light up the brain. The hand-eye coordination, the small motor skills that are being developed that way, just forming the words and the letters in their minds. There's massive, massive evidence that actually helps students grasp and comprehend the material far more deeply than it does just reading it on or typing it out.
Friends, if you have access to a sheet of paper, pen or pencil, we're going to go through 10 steps. We've established the problem here. What is a call to action? How can we reclaim this adolescent mind? And we'll go through some of those right after the break. This is Crosstalk on VCY America.
It has been said, bad politicians are elected by good people who don't vote. Every election cycle gets more intense, and there is much at stake. Often there are questions, how should I vote? Why should I vote? And who should vote? In the book, The Bible and Your Vote, Dr. Andy Woods addresses these questions so every Christian can vote with confidence, no matter who or what is on the ballot. The Bible and Your Vote offers biblical and historical insights on 5 key categories: economics, social issues, climate, power and personal rights, and foreign policy. These timeless principles will help you quickly identify candidates whose character or agenda best reflects biblical values. VCY is offering The Bible and Your Vote for a donation of $15 or more. Call 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk coming your way from VCY America with a probing question today. Why are students losing the ability to read? And pointing out some alarming things that are going on. And sadly, we just, kind of like a turnstile, we're just continuing to push through young people through the educational system and allow them to be graduated or to pass on to the next level when many are still struggling in some of the very basic aspects of education, like being able to read, being able to write, and being able to read cursive writing and write cursively as well. And there's more that could be said about this and some troubling things that have come out through the National Assessment of Education Progress, or the NAEP scores as well. It's some alarming information there, but I do want to be sure that we not only have established the problem, which I believe we've done that, but also a call to action on how to reclaim this, the adolescent mind, so to speak, a mind that has been slowing down. What can we do? What steps can we take? And let me mention the first that you write about, and we'll mention all 10 of these and just have you give a brief description of each one. The first you state is to prioritize print preservation. Comment on that, if you would.
Yes, happy to. So if you ever visited my home for decades, I have amassed quite a massive book collection. I can't tell you how many times people came in and said, "Why are you putting all these books in your house? You can just get them online. They take up so much space. What a waste." But back then I realized, if this stuff is online, they can edit this and they can change it, and that's exactly what they've been doing.
Yeah.
So the long knives of censorship came out, years ago, just that they were carving out language that they found offensive, historical language that was just, critical to the time and understanding, what was happening in this genre, in this era. And so things that are newer publications are very much not close to the original source. So I think it's imperative that people get back to really, get back to good books, get back to as close to the original publication date as you can, get back to the old language to challenge the mind and read that, because when you get into very descriptive, robust language, the pictures that it paints in the mind are just so much. It's such great exercise for the brain too, to just try to understand what they're saying.
Okay.
And if it's a word you don't know, the kid has to go look it up, and which is always a great exercise to find out what does that word actually mean.
Prioritize print preservation is one. Number two, challenge the one-to-one fallacy.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most expensive things we all face in our property taxes, right? I swear, every 2 years, our schools come at us with another technology referendum, right? And so they're always trying to say that, yes, everybody has to have a device, everybody has to have this, but we need to challenge that, because that is a fallacy. One thing, if we don't want our kids on screens all the time, we really need to get them off the screens in the school, because as we're seeing and as the data is showing, it is not helping their learning, and it's very disruptive, and it's not conducive to learning, and it's actually dumbing them down. So I think we really need to challenge that. We need to get in front of our school boards. We need to challenge the superintendents. So we need to even challenge our own students, our own kids. We have to really push to get rid of this and get back to the teacher-led instruction and dialogue and conversation, and learning that way by interacting with each other, because that also, part of that too, with the one-to-one, it also isolates children from each other. If they're just interacting with a screen, they're not talking to other people and hearing their ideas.
Number three is don't let kids have cell phones. Don't let kids have cell phones in the classroom. Full stop.
Yes, I have heard of many schools where now they have when you walk into the school, you have to check your phone into the front desk, and it stays there until the day is out unless there's an emergency. And I think we have to get back to that. These kids you're going to get a little pushback at first, but the kids learn to live without those phones, and it's going to be to the benefit of everybody else. And one thing, too, this was something that was kind of shocking to me, was that so many of the texts that kids are answering during the school day are coming from their own parents. So parents, just be aware. Don't text your kids during the school day unless you absolutely have to.
Number 4 on the list.
We want to model that as
Number
well.
4 on the list is to encourage boredom. That's number 4.
Yeah, boredom is, I think, a long-lost art. We used to call it daydreaming, or he's just such a daydreamer, but actually that is where some of the best ideas have come up. People just thinking about things, and that quiet time of introspection and contemplation. When you are constantly being stimulated by something from the outside, they call it doom scrolling, or this entertainment, or just getting these constant little, hits here and there of a funny thing or something to laugh at. You're just watching. You're just becoming a spectator. You're not processing information. You're just a passive spectator, and that is not conducive to learning. That's just a massive distraction, and the imagination is just going to be stunted. It is stunted by that kind of that kind of stuff.
We need to go to number 5, teach your littles to read and write.
Yes, that is so simple. I think parents, unfortunately, have for too long been told that they're not equipped to teach their own kids, or they're not qualified to teach their own kids. Phonics is the easiest thing in the world. Just get yourself a good phonics program. As soon as your kids show any interest at all in what words or letters mean, start the phonics and teach them to read, and they will be reading well before kindergarten. It's going to open up a whole new world for them. So that is something they absolutely can do at home very, very easily, and it doesn't take that long.
Number 6.
And they'll start with the writing. The writing will just follow right along with it.
Number 6 is to delay access and use of devices.
Yeah, we need to take a page from the tech bros here. I mean, all of them, like Jobs and Gates and Zuckerberg, they're all famous for saying they rarely let their kids on devices. And I always thought that was kind of interesting because they created this stuff, so they know exactly the dangers that the screen time poses. So I think we need to take a page from them, but try to delay it as soon as you can. I mean, there was a time where, nobody had, like, my kids are a little older now, but they were the last to get cell phones, and they were not happy about it, but we knew that, well, once you have a cell phone, then you've got the internet, and then it's really hard to control what you're running into because by that point you couldn't even screen the internet out. But now you go to a restaurant and you see toddlers on iPads at the table with mom and dad, and I'm thinking this is just a wasted time of family fellowship and time together. So you have got to get the kids off these devices and model it for them as well. We
need to move on here. The next one is to put down the phone and pick up a book.
Yes, that's just self-explanatory. Just just grab some books, start reading, have books packed for the kids. Next time the family vacation, have a book along to the car for the beach or whatever, and just stick to the books and get off the digital devices.
Get kids outside. Leave all phones behind.
Yes. You could put one in the glove box if you need it for an emergency, but if you're going to the beach or doing something like that or taking a walk or riding your bikes, there's no need to have phones there documenting every single thing that's happening. And modeling that again for your children, I think, is just a huge, huge, huge thing. One of our family favorite movies was The Sandlot, and I still always kind of go back to that. I mean, here were kids just going outside, picking up players, picking the teams, learning how to negotiate for those kind of stuff. I mean, we got to get back to that kind of stuff. Kids have to learn how to be children and learn how to interact with each other and, develop relationships that way. And, being on a phone, being entertained is not conducive to that.
And that leads us to number 9, to discourage the I must document everything culture.
Yeah, that I think, well, not only is it a massive distraction, but it actually fuels a very nefarious sidebar, which is just this whole narcissistic culture that we're creating in our children, right? I mean, it never in my wildest dreams did I think we'd all have a little website about ourselves, right?
Right. Here's how I'm going. Here's how I'm wearing my hair today. Here's my makeup for today. Here's what I'm having for breakfast and documenting the breakfast. And here I am waiting now for my bus to school or whatever it may be.
Right. That is just unhealthy in every shape and form. And so, but that's unfortunately what so many of our kids are aspiring to be now are these influencers because they think that's the way to make money and, blah, blah, blah. But so many times when you get into this culture or get into the cult of influencers, a lot of boundaries and guardrails start to be worn down as well because the incentive there can be very perverse in terms of what you have to start posting for content in order to get likes and followers. So, that's another dangerous area to get into. So I would highly discourage parents from letting their kids get to that point.
And then number 10 is carve out phone-free days with your family and protect them.
Yes. It kind of goes back to that, just get outside and leave the phone behind. I mean, it really is, like I think it was Charlie Kirk, or I hope I'm saying this correctly, but I believe he said on Saturdays he did not check his phone. He never checked his emails. He just did not get online. He just left it behind, and he was devoted to his family. And I think we need to get back to that. I mean, we got to try to find, ways to do this and just do other activities together. There's so much that's in this world that is so beautiful. I will say I think probably one of the side benefits of COVID was that people discovered the national parks because they couldn't go anywhere else. Our national parks were full during the COVID stuff, and that was really great and good to see. And I think that's had a little bit of staying power. But I mean, there's just things like that. Just get out there and do that, and then just just protect it. Just be faithful with and protect it. It's not. Here's the thing. I guess the solutions are actually fairly easy and straightforward. It's just the implementation that's hard, because it does require some discipline on the parents as well, right?
Indeed. Friends, we're going to open our phone lines. If you have a question you'd like to ask of our guest or a brief comment, our number 800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829. Bonnie, let's also just get in the word. You've got a conference coming up late April, correct?
We do. Yes, it's going to be exceptional. So it's both an in-person and live-streamed event. So if someone is not in the area, they could register for the online option for it. But it's our national launch of our campaign called Join the Movement. And so the bottom line is that obviously there are many areas where children are in danger, and it includes trafficking, online safety, violence, bullying in schools, medical freedom, educational indoctrination, all of that stuff. But we understand and we recognize that protecting kids is a universally shared goal by most people, in spite of even the deep divisions we may have in some beliefs and opinions. But what's happening is the enemy is always trying to divide us on these differences and prevent us from linking arms and working together to protect kids from all of these issues. So that's what this conference is about, to bring people together. And we have just an incredible lineup of speakers like Mel Kay, who's speaking on Agenda 2030, Alvin Louis, who's going to be speaking on the psychology of offense, Mark Trammell, who is the CEO of the law firm Center for American Liberty, who's going to speak on dismantling the gender-industrial complex, one lawsuit at a time. And then Dr. Michelle Cretella, who I think you've said you've had as a guest, who's going to be speaking on protecting our youth from the trans ideology. And then finally, Laura Logan, who's going to discuss how much time do we actually have left? I mean, where are we in this battle? Yeah. And the whole thing is going to be emceed by Liz Collin, who is, if you're not familiar with her, she is one of the most fearless and tenacious journalists out there. She reported the truth on the George Floyd riots and his death, and has produced a number of films and everything else. So it's just, I'm still kind of pinching myself. It's quite a lineup. So we're very excited about it. So, if people would like to get more information, they can just go to cpleducation.com or cpleaction.com, either one.
Okay, cpleaction.com or cpleducation.com.
Education.com. Yep.
Okay.
Either one. They'll get there.
And let's see, the date for this is April 25th.
April 25th, yep. It's at a secure venue in Bloomington, Minnesota, very close to the airport, if they wanted to come in person live. Otherwise, the online streaming version is available as well. Okay. And that is also available for on-demand afterwards.
Okay. One more time, the website?
cpleducation.com or cpleaction.com.
Great. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, friends, I see our lines are all packed out, so we'll get as many calls as we can into our final segment here. Keep your comments brief. We want them, if you're making a comment, just a minute or less, or if you have a question, please get right to your question, the very hub of your question, so that our guests can address that. And we'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. A new report out by SRN News, well, it should stop every discerning Christian in their tracks, because according to a new Lifeway research poll, 73% of self-described evangelical Christians in Canada now agree that everyone is born innocent in the eyes of God. 66% affirm that everyone sins a little, but most people are good by nature. And then a stunning 66%, they believe that the Holy Spirit is a force, but is not a personal being. Of course, that last one is a literal attack on the gospel itself, the Trinity. But let's take this issue of people being born innocent. The Bible speaks to this. I was conceived in sin. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. The heart and mind are deceitfully wicked above all else. Who can know it? The Bible speaks to these issues. Clearly, there's not enough Bible teaching in the churches of Canada. And I think this would also hold for America. I'm Brennan House.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Bonnie Gasper with us today, and from the Child Protection League. And just responding to this issue, why students are losing the ability to read. Our lines are packed. Our first caller is from Bloomington, Illinois. Greg, you're on the air.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Bonnie, you are spot on with these things that you're talking about. I think that this started many, many years ago, maybe even before I was born, with some of the cartoons. Even when Sesame Street came out, and we know what it's about now, but even when that came out, I remember my brother telling me this is overstimulating these kids' brains. And some of the cartoons, it's just there's one particular cartoon called The Fairly Odd Parents that used to be in the 2000s, in the year 2000. And it's just go, 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 fast, fast, fast. Hidden humor after hidden humor, and it's just a mile a minute. I think there's a lot of overstimulation that even began before the phones and the iPads and that. But, yeah, I can attest to what you're saying. So
great. Thank you, Greg, for that. This matter of overstimulation, Bonnie.
I think he's spot on with that too, and I think, and I don't know if there's anybody who's done a real serious look at this, but we have to really consider the fact that what has exploded in the last 40, 50 years, ADD and ADHD, right? Yeah. All is attention deficit, and we're medicating kids, and it's primarily boys, right? It's almost, I can't remember what the number is for 12-year-old boys, but the majority, I shouldn't say majority, but a ton of them are on, these very powerful psychotropic drugs so that they can just sit still in class. But part of it is if your brain is conditioned to be overstimulated and active all the time and just constantly distracted and constantly moving and not thinking, it's just exasperating a problem where, little boys are already busy. They're just naturally busy. That's how God made them.
Great.
And they want to learn. They still have fully the capacity to learn, but when we're coaching the brain and teasing the brain and training the brain to just be distracted all the time and moving on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, it is creating what they were talking earlier about. It's this fragmented attention deficit. So, yeah, he's right.
Thank you, Greg, for the call. Let's go to Laura in Maryland. Laura, you're on the air.
Hi. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Bonnie. I can't tell you how much this has affected my life as an adult, let alone my children. I just read like a real book, sat down. I know it's not big. I read The Island of Dolphins in one day, and boy, talk about a brain break. Just reading that, it's been crazy. And the other aspect of it, too, is I have ADHD. I've had it all my life, and it has done nothing but make it worse. So we've got to get back to basics, just like Bonnie suggests, and get the screens less and less and less. And I just bought a brick to help myself.
Thank you, Laura, for that.
Good for you. No, that's encouraging to hear. And, modeling that around people that are watching you do that, I think that's even a small step, but you're right. And I agree with you. I even see it in my own self. I think I mentioned earlier, when I flip between, so I have a day job, and I have my board work, and then I have, obviously other things, and my phone is constantly lighting up because I have this text group and that signal group and this email group and that, you know what I mean? So it's just like I feel like I'm training myself to have ADD as well. So I have to be very cognizant of that as well, and just make sure that I am not being so distracted and fragmented and I can't concentrate and finish the task. Because we're all susceptible to this, and we're adults. We all have much more in terms of the ability to actually self-modulate our behavior, but think about little kids who don't.
Yeah, we've got to move on to, thank you for the call, Laura. Eric in Iron Mountain, Michigan, and Eric, you're on the air.
Thanks for taking my call, guys. Great program today. Just wanted to mention, Bonnie already touched on it lightly there, but the Rhinelander, Wisconsin School District just announced this last week they're calling it a bell-to-bell cell phone ban for the 26-27 school year. I think that's an excellent idea. There's a lot of comments on the Facebook and that I looked up and seen. Parents are actually against it and trying to fight it using the excuse of an emergency. We all survived going to school without a cell phone, and classrooms have telephones in them now, and they even have a lot of them have 911 buttons directly to the police department. So this excuse that parents are actually backing their kids up it seemed, and wanting them and allowing them, and like Bonnie said, actually texting them during school and everything. We couldn't even have a glass of water at our desk in school when I went to school.
Well, thank you, Eric. And that's a battle many school districts are having right now, Bonnie, is that of banning cell phones in the classroom. More and more schools are becoming wise to that issue.
Yeah. Well, and it is interesting that he mentions that parents, there seems to be a contingent of parents that are fighting this, but we have to think again about the demographic of parents. So a lot of them were raised on phones and technology, so this has just become part of their day, and that contributes to the whole helicopter parent syndrome and a lot of other things we're talking about. But he's right, too. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that there used to be a commercial at 10 o'clock at night that said, "Do you know where your kids are?"
That's right.
Because our parents didn't know where we were. You know?
Thank you, Eric. We're going to squeeze one last call in here. That's Dee in Milwaukee. Hi, Dee. You're on the air. Hello, Dee.
Yes.
You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call, and I really appreciate the topic today. I'm 75. My son is 54, and if I could go back and do things differently with those cartoons, I would, but I can't. I don't know if it was mentioned that the Bible, the reading of God's Word, is such an edifier, it's a supreme teacher.
Right.
And what more do we need? Obviously, we live in a world where there's a lot of information, but absolutely, if anyone is going to teach us how to read, it's the Holy Spirit in His Word. And I just wanted to bring that up.
Great. Thank you, Dee, for doing so. And Bonnie, isn't that often what was used as a textbook in the schools, the Bible?
It was the original textbook. It really was. It was the original textbook. Not only is it a history book, it is also filled with poetry and rhyme, and I mean, we talk about a murder mystery and intrigue and all these kinds of things, right? The Bible has it all, but it also was just a code of conduct and ethics as well, and truth. It was, I mean, the Bible is the truth, and so kids were raised on this to understand that yes, we have a Creator God. Yes, He made you. Yes, this is true. And when that was removed from schools and the fundamental text of truth, then they can bring in all this stuff like, well, you can choose your gender when you're 3 years old. Maybe it depends how you feel. You know, God made a mistake. He wasn't sure. You know, all these seeds of doubt are sown into kids when you start introducing text and introducing things that are absolutely not rooted in truth.
Bonnie, we're out of time. Thank you so much for being with us. We're completely out of time here, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having me. It was wonderful.
Friends, again, cpleducation.com, cpleducation.com. As Frederick Douglass said, once you learn to read, you'll be forever free. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.